This is a U.S. China Media Brief produced by the UCLA Asian American Studies Center.
One is that if you have a novel, for example, that you know was widely read, maybe even infectiously popular, I think you can be pretty sure that it wasn't infectiously popular by accident. There was probably something in it that resonated with the ideas and values of the people who were attracted to it. So then, if you read it, you can look at what's portrayed in it as a value, good behavior, bad behavior, or something. And especially in not very subtle novels, it's not hard to infer what people must be thinking or feeling or finding a value in order to be so attracted to that novel. And the same would hold for things like jokes and blogs and so on, blogs that get 1 million hits and so on. So let's get to it now. I want to talk first about anti-corruption novels. There was a spate of these that appeared beginning during the doom and the gloom after the repression at Tiananmen in 1989. My friend Jeffrey Kinkley has a good book about this called Corruption and Realism in Late Socialist China. These are novels like Lu Tianming's Heaven Above, Cang Tian Zai Shang, Zhang Ping's Jue Ze Choice, and many others that had readers, some of them in the millions, as well as being put into television and film versions and so on. So I think we can make a claim that they resonated. Some of the stories are true, or only thinly disguised true stories. Others are imagined stories, but with details that seem true. In fact, I think to readers, one might say, feel resoundingly true. For example, stories about gaudy wealth, banquets of bear paws and duck tongues at 10,000 yuan per table. Not only gaudy, but illicitly gained, unfairly gained through bribery and extortion and things like that, and then described in false language with a shameless kind of hypocrisy of disguising private interest as public service. This spate, as I've called it, of anti-corruption novels sort of petered out in the early part of the present decade, around 2002 or 2003, as the government clamped down on them a little bit, and put pressure on publishers against their publication. And one can ask, why could writers in those years get away with this kind of writing in the first place? One way they got away with it was to write about people who were already disgraced. Chen Fang's novel about tse-tung in the novel Tiananmen, Heaven's Wrath, is a good example of that. Tse-tung was the mayor of Beijing who was officially denounced for corruption, and so writing a novel about it wasn't that dangerous. Another way was to imply that these corruption problems are local problems always, but higher-ups, of course, are clean. Large amounts of lurid detail can still get exposed so long as an official from the Central Discipline and Inspection Commission can appear deus ex machina at the end to set things right. And the reader and the author here, I think, kind of have an 心照不宣, a kind of an unspoken pact that we both know that what you've written about the higher-ups saving the situation is window dressing for the real fun of the novel, which is all of the detail about the lurid corruption. Another way writers got away with it, this is perhaps most clever of all, was to put the most incendiary comments into the mouths of people who are clearly cast in the novel as bad characters, as villains, who can say things like, the Communist Party is a private membership group. The People's Armed Police is a band of hired thugs. And other statements that, among the popular readership, can have legs, as it were, and get away with it because the person who said them was officially wrong. And officially, two negatives are supposed to make a positive, but from the point of view of the reader, the ideas still get out there. Now, these anti-corruption novels are, we might say, muckraking novels. exposing bad behavior. And one might ask, what does that have to do with values, with positive values? And I want to make another important point here, methodological point, if you will, and that would be, it's wrong to say that muckrakers and their readers are celebrating the muck. I mean, in a sense they are, yeah, but the muck is interesting and important to them precisely because it's a spectacular violation of values like fairness and truth and modesty that the narrator and the reader implicitly uphold and that they share. And I think the sharing idea is important here. The notion that us readers, including probably an ordinary person reading the novel, would feel this same indignation. The reader of an anti-corruption novel would enjoy it much less, I feel confident, if he or she had to think, I'm probably the only one who feels this way. They don't. They have the sense that we all feel this way. So in short, this kind of writing, which at one level can appear to be tearing down values, in an important sense does just the opposite, at least sometimes. It can be an implicit way of upholding the values by exposing the ways in which they are violated. Another popular form that I've studied about 10 years ago, I wrote a paper about these, but I've collected them ever since, called 顺口溜. How do we translate that? Slippery jingles or something. They're sayings that are passed around orally, almost always rhythmical, usually rhymed, and invariably satiric. Some spreading across all of China and staying around for years, giving us good grounds, I think, to say they resonate with popular thought. Others much more ephemeral, but these too, like a huge school of minnows, just because there's so many of them and that they're so alike, they present a broader portrait of what people feel. I said most of them have to do with satire of official corruption, for example. And I'll give you an example. Here's one. This is my translation. I try to make them rhyme because the originals rhyme. Officials are addicted to money while the people labor and sweat. If something else counts, then it's funny that no one's run into it yet. On official corruption. And here's one that expands on the notion that it's ill-got gains that the officials have. This is about someone who's in charge of all kinds of channels of corruption to his own bank account. He's got the finance system on his left and the banking network to his right. He taxes all of industry with all his beastly might. He's the king of electric current and prince of the water pipe. But what's he care for kids at school? Not a piece of tripe. Now, again, we can ask, how do they get away with this? Well, one way is that there are no authors here. These are like jokes in the West. You know, you heard the joke about this or that and so on. So having no authors, it's hard to pin anybody with the responsibility for them. Anyone who gets caught saying one could always say, well, I heard it from somebody else, and that's no doubt true. They're, by the way, passed around in text messaging a lot now in the last 10 years, not just on the oral grapevine, but still anonymously.
The preceding copyrighted program is a property of the University of California, Los Angeles. All rights reserved. It may be used freely for educational and not-for-profit activities. For other uses or to make an inquiry, please contact the Asian American Studies Center at UCLA.